You're in the shower, or driving home, or lying in bed staring at the ceiling, and suddenly the argument from earlier comes back. Not just the memory of it, the whole scene, their voice, your words, the exact moment they said that thing that annoyed you. And then your brain does something strange. It rewinds the conversation and starts rewriting it. You think of the response you should have said, the perfect line that would have shut everything down. And before you know it, you're having the argument all over again, in your head. Maybe hours later, sometimes days later. Which raises a strange question. Why does your brain refuse to let certain arguments end? Why do some conversations just keep replaying, like a mental loop you didn't ask for? Because most of the time, this isn't about the argument itself. It's about what your brain is trying to protect. There's actually a well-known psychological pattern behind this. Psychologists call it rumination. It's the mind's tendency to repeatedly think about the same event, especially when it involves conflict, embarrassment, or unresolved emotion. And rumination isn't random. Your brain usually starts replaying arguments when something important feels unfinished. Not the conversation itself, but the emotional meaning behind it. When an argument ends awkwardly, abruptly, or without clarity, your brain experiences something psychologists sometimes call an open loop. Your mind naturally tries to close unfinished situations. The same reason a cliffhanger episode sticks in your head, except in this case, the story is about you. Your brain is trying to solve something, fix something, protect something. And the first thing it tries to protect is your sense of identity. Think about it. Most arguments aren't really about the surface topic. They're about something underneath. Respect, fairness, being heard, being understood. So when an argument ends and you feel misunderstood, dismissed, or attacked, your brain doesn't just register a disagreement. It registers a threat to how you see yourself. That's why hours later your mind suddenly comes up with the perfect explanation you wish you'd said. Because your brain is trying to restore the version of you that felt accurate, the version that makes sense, the version that wasn't reduced to two clumsy sentences in a tense moment. Your brain is basically running a simulation. If I had said this, they would have understood me. And that imagined outcome gives your mind a temporary sense of closure. But here's the problem. Your brain can't actually finish the conversation, so it keeps trying, over and over. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman, known for his work on how our minds process experiences, described something called the remembering self. This is the part of you that constantly interprets past events and builds meaning from them. The remembering self hates unresolved social tension. Because humans are deeply social creatures, our brains evolved to care a lot about status, belonging, and reputation inside a group. An argument isn't just words. Your brain reads it as social data. Did you lose status? Did you look weak? Did someone misunderstand you? So later, when you're brushing your teeth or trying to fall asleep, your mind starts reviewing the footage. Not to torture you, but to analyze the outcome. This is especially strong if you care about the person you argued with. A conflict with a coworker might linger for a few hours, but a conflict with a close friend, partner, or family member, your brain treats that as high priority, because relationships affect safety and belonging. But there's another reason some people replay arguments even more intensely. And it has to do with emotional processing speed. Some people process emotions in real time. When they feel something, they immediately express it. Others process emotions more slowly. The realization of what they feel or what they wish they'd said comes later. Psychologist Carl Jung described this difference in how people orient themselves internally versus externally. Some people think by talking. Others understand their thoughts only after reflecting privately. If you're in the second group, arguments can feel especially frustrating. Because while the conversation was happening, your brain was still catching up. And hours later, the clarity finally arrives. You suddenly know exactly what you meant, but the moment is already gone. That delayed clarity is one reason your brain keeps replaying the scene. It's trying to integrate the version of you that finally understands the situation. But there's an even deeper layer to these mental replays, and it has to do with fairness. Humans have a very strong internal fairness detector.
Psychologists studying moral cognition have shown that our brains react strongly to situations that feel unjust or unequal. So if an argument ends in a way that feels unfair, maybe someone twisted your words, interrupted you, or dismissed your point, your brain treats that as a problem that needs resolution. You might notice this pattern. The arguments you replay the most are usually the ones where you didn't feel fully heard, not the ones you clearly won. And this is where the mental loop can start affecting relationships in subtle ways. Imagine this scenario. You have a tense conversation with someone. It ends awkwardly. They move on with their day, but your brain keeps replaying it.
By the time you see them again, you've mentally argued with them 20 more times. You've imagined everything they meant, every hidden insult, every possible interpretation. So when you interact with them again, you're carrying emotional momentum they don't even know exists. And this creates a strange feedback loop. Your brain replays the argument, you become more emotionally invested, the next interaction feels heavier, which gives your brain more material to analyze later. The other person might think the conflict was minor, but in your mind, it's still unfolding. This is one reason rumination can feel so exhausting. Your brain thinks it's solving the problem, but most of the time, it's just replaying the same emotional puzzle without new information. And yet, there's something important to understand here. The fact that your brain does this doesn't mean you're overly sensitive, dramatic, or bad at conflict. In many ways, it reflects something thoughtful about your mind. It means you care about meaning, you care about fairness, you care about being understood. Your brain is trying to refine the story of what happened so it aligns with your values and your identity. That impulse, wanting clarity and emotional accuracy, isn't a flaw. But when the mind tries to solve a social situation without new input, it ends up circling the same scene again and again, almost like a detective rereading the same case file, looking for a clue that isn't there. So the real shift doesn't happen when you find the perfect comeback in your head. The shift happens when you recognize what your brain was actually searching for. Not the perfect sentence. Closure. Recognition. A feeling that your experience makes sense. And sometimes that closure doesn't come from finishing the argument. It comes from understanding yourself better inside it. Because when you step back, you can often see the real pattern. You replay arguments not because you're obsessed with winning them, but because something important to you felt unseen. And your mind kept trying to restore that missing understanding. So the next time you catch your brain replaying an old conversation while you're lying awake at night, notice what your mind is really trying to repair. Was it respect? Fairness? Being heard? When you recognize the deeper need behind the replay, the argument often loses its grip, because suddenly it's no longer a mystery your brain has to solve. It's a signal about what matters to you. And once you understand that signal, the loop finally starts to quiet down. Which leads to another fascinating psychological pattern that a lot of people discover about themselves. Why some people feel mentally drained after certain social interactions, even when nothing dramatic happened. Because the brain isn't just processing what people say, it's constantly processing what conversations mean. And once you notice that pattern, you start to understand your social energy in a completely different way.